After winning the election with a majority government, Doug Ford was finally sworn in as premier late last week. Now, since he has now become premier, there has been a number of announcements that Doug Ford is planning to do in terms of making changes to how the government operates. Now, I have been notably skeptical of Doug Ford. And one of the first things that he did was pull OHIP Plus coverage from kids and young adults with private insurance. Now, I looked deep into that story, and honestly, I didn't see anything seriously wrong with it. So if you have private insurance as a young adult or a kid, you're covered. And if something in your private coverage doesn't cover a certain prescription drug that, say, the government coverage does, then you will still be covered. So I looked deep into that and didn't see any real issue with it. But moving on to Doug Ford's plan to scrap the cap and trade system, there are serious issues with what Doug Ford is planning. And I'm going to break it down. So, some of you out there are going to be, that are watching this, are going to be Doug Ford voters and are going to be skeptical of me. But I'm going to break down the facts and you decide for yourself what you think. Okay? So let me first go to this quote here from the Globe and Mail. In a statement released on Tuesday, Doug Ford said he has revoked the regulation that outlines the carbon pricing system, and his government will officially begin winding down all green programs funded through it this week. Okay, now, what is the purpose of Doug Ford trying to scrap this cap and trade system and winding down all the green energy programs? So ultimately, the Progressive Conservatives estimate the move will cut the price of gasoline in Ontario by 4.3 cents a litre almost immediately and will reduce prices of other goods. So, on the face of it, if you're just concerned about gas prices, it doesn't sound too bad. It sounds like a good deal. You get to save on the cost of gas. Doug Ford scrapping this green energy program that you never used anyway, so what's the big deal? Let me explain. Okay, so first we have to understand what the cap and trade system, what scrapping it does. So it also throws those, quote, big government programs funded by $2 billion in annual cap and trade revenues into doubt. Those include renovations to hospitals, schools, and social housing buildings, provincial funding for bike paths and transit, and numerous other things like a program to promote new wood construction technologies to replace carbon-intensive concrete. Now still, if you're a Doug Ford voter, if you're a conservative, you may think, oh, this only affects those crazy environmentalists. No. Let me break this down even further. So, right away, there are serious issues here. So the money generated by the cap and trade system funded green energy programs that fueled an entire industry of jobs. Now, a big example of this is Doug Ford axing the Green On program that provided rebates for energy-conscious homeowners. Now, the Green On program was funded by the cap and trade system, which is why it's been scrapped under Doug Ford. Now, instead of giving my opinion on how this affects people, let me show you from a Doug Ford voter how this affected him. So, Rick Browning is a Ford voter who recently signed an agreement for new windows for his house. And he tweeted this out. So our first Ford fucking just happened. I signed an agreement today for new windows and got a call to advise the green energy program for new windows has been canceled. I voted for you. What a useless waste of skin. More screwing to come. Stay tuned. Make this go viral. Now, Rick got a lot of hate on Twitter from non-Ford voters saying, why didn't you see this coming? Ford already talked about how he was going to scrap the cap and trade system, and you should have saw this coming. Well, I understand some of that hate, but at the same time, it was on the Liberals and the NDP to really communicate what scrapping the cap and trade system would do to the industry. So Rick here, he would have got a rebate on his new windows if this cap and trade system and this Green On program was not scrapped. But because Doug Ford is scrapping it, he no longer gets that rebate. Now you may think, well, I'm not getting new windows, so who cares? It goes deeper than that. So you have to think about how this actually affects the industry. So a couple other people in that same thread, because this tweet did blow up, a couple other people in that thread broke this down. So this is from Jeff Butler. Rick Browning cancels his order. The workers who were going to make them don't make them. The drivers who were going to deliver them don't deliver them. The people who were doing the installing don't install them. And this helps who? And Daryl Patterson responded, I'm a window salesman. Trust me, I understand your frustration. This puts a huge wrench in our industry. So think about it. The money that was being generated from the cap and trade system was a massive boon to a number of industries like windows and doors. And people that were going to purchase new windows for their house because they had the rebate, they were going to get a rebate back for buying new windows because of the green energy program, no longer have that rebate. So they no longer decide to buy new windows. And who loses out? The company loses out. The salesman loses out. The truck driver loses out, and the installers lose out. It affects real people's jobs. Now, this bonehead approach has been tried in other industries, in other provinces, and it oftentimes doesn't work there either. So let me show you an example. As a writer for the Beaverton pointed out on Twitter, Nova Scotia's film tax credit cost the government $10 million, but brought $132 million of business to local businesses. If a subsidy generates more value than it costs, your government would be stupid to not make use of it. And that's exactly what's happening in this situation as well. So yes, people were paying slightly more in taxes, but that investment then leads to a much larger gain for the economy. So we get back more than we put in. Now, there's also the legal side of this. So Ontario companies have bought close to $3 billion in permits under the cap and trade system and need to know whether they will be compensated for those permits, noting some have suggested the province should offer a full refund. The NDP and the Green Party have said Mr. Ford's rush to pull out of the cap and trade system could stick taxpayers with the tab for billions in legal fees, penalties, and other costs. Mr. Ford's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday, but the Premier said in the statement that he believes scrapping cap and trade will put money back in Ontarians' pockets. So, is Ontario now on the hook for this $3 billion in permits that these companies have already spent under the existing cap and trade system? These companies are going to want their money back. Who's paying that? So look, these are the kinds of details that don't get hashed out in an election. It's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to save taxpayers money by scrapping cap and trade. But then when you get down to the actual details, you recognize that people's jobs are on the line, companies that are invested in green energy are on the line, people that wanted services like new windows now can't afford them because the rebate is no longer there, and issues like Ontario having to likely pay back $3 billion. This is the kind of thing that you can't ignore. It's not simply about the nice headline of, oh, Doug Ford saves taxpayers 4 cents on gas. It's about the details. How does this actually work out? So, in my opinion, looking at all the facts here, clearly I think getting rid of cap and trade will hurt real people's lives and ultimately cost all of us in Ontario a lot more money.